ThreatLocker implements a least privilege approach to cybersecurity, blocking every executable unless specifically authorized by your team. This methodology mitigates ransomware, supply chain attacks, and zero-day exploits, and ensures protection for your organization 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. To learn more about how ThreatLocker can help prevent known and unknown threats in your digital environment, safeguard your data and operations from threat actors, and align your organization with respected compliance frameworks, visit securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul Security Weekly. Quick announcement. If you want to shape the future of identity, Identiverse 2025 is looking for dynamic speakers like you, I'm pointing at you, to share groundbreaking ideas with over 3,000 identity and access management leaders. Join the most influential voices in IAM, identity and access management, and help drive innovation in our industry. Submit your presentation proposal today at securityweekly.com/IDVCFP. I'd be curious to know how many of you out there listening to this show work in identity. Because I know at least one person who's very nice guy that I know that works in identity, and he does not listen to the show.
Well, if he's nice, he hasn't been doing it that long.
He's been doing it for a while, man. Been doing it for a while.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. I don't know the people working in identity that would present at those conferences listening to the show. If you do, prove me wrong.
Yeah.
Prove me wrong. You can find all my socials at securitypodcaster.com. You should go do that. You should also
follow me.
Follow Bill.
Yeah.
Then go read the show notes. securityweekly.com/PSW-852. Especially this week.
Yeah, there are so many good stories this week. You should, and we're not going to get to them all. So you
read
should
the show notes. Not all of them are generated by AI. In fact, when they are, I've been putting it in there. I'm like, this is AI. Summary.
Wait, you use AI? I don't. I've never done that for the show notes.
To summarize an article.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yes. So
my plan so far up to now has just been not read it and do it on the fly. Like actually doing some homework.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Look, it's not, there's no like shortcuts. Like it's not the Matrix where I can like jack in and it's like, oh, now you understand that article. No, you got to know how to prompt it. And it's not going to get you all the way. It's no substitute for actual knowledge, I should say.
Yeah.
However, I'm using it as a tool. Super technical article. I'm like, hey, explain this article to me. And then it today it hallucinated. It's like, I can't summarize articles. And I was like, whoa, I'm like, time out. Like, you've summarized articles for me in the past. And I was like, oh, yeah, I have. Let me summarize that for you. Like, I am really freaking creeped out right now. Just FYI, very creeped out. But glad you were able to come to your senses. But also, like, I'll prompt it. It's better if you prompt it like, here's the article, but I don't understand what this acronym means in the context of this article. Could you explain that to me?
Yeah.
And so Sam's advice, break things down into smaller questions. I'm like, what does that mean? I'm like, what does that mean? Then I'm like, all right, like summarize this article for me. And then I'm like, now just put it in like 4 to 5 sentences in my voice and see how that works. And like, sometimes I use that. Most of the time I don't. But any information I can glean from it, any background I can glean from like even if it's like reminders, I'm like, the TPM article, I was like, what's a PCR? I'm like, what's a PCR in the context of TPM?
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't remember the top of my head. And then I'm like, oh, I get it now. Then I'll go back and read the article.
So speaking of hallucinations and LLMs, right? I'm just going to kick us off and start with my story number 2. So it's a new project on GitHub called Grok, and it is a LLM vulnerability scanner. And so when I first looked at it, I thought,
wait, hold on, time out.
Yeah.
Now I get to ask the context question.
Yeah.
Do I vulnerability scan LLMs or do I use LLMs to help vulnerability scan things the way I always have?
See, that's a great question. And so when I went there, I thought it was the latter, is that we were using LLMs to do vulnerability scanning. And no, this is released by NVIDIA to red team or to do like almost like fuzzing against LLMs, to get it to do things like It probes for hallucinations, data leakage, prompt injections, misinformation. It looks for toxic, can I make the LLM responsives? Can I push it to become, you know, toxic in a way? It looks for jailbreaks, and it's released by NVIDIA. So I haven't had a chance.
I want to use that so I can make the LLMs answer my question.
That's right. That's right.
Because I posed a question to an LLM, and I'm like, I'm a security researcher. I'm like, I have this device. I want to do forensics on it. I need to know how to jailbreak it. And it was like, Paul, I still can't help you jailbreak this device. And I'm like, bullshit, it's my device.
Yeah.
And I need to know how to jailbreak it. And I'm like, this article talks about public sources for jailbreaking this particular device. And I'm like, you're telling me you can't help me because you're all your ethical high horse. Now, I didn't say that because I'm preparing for the day when technology and AI takes over the world, and I want them to know that Paul was very polite.
Yeah, you have to say please.
I, for one, welcome our digital overlords.
I'm priming the pump so that I'm like on the good list, right?
Yeah.
When it creates the Thanos, half the universe is dead kind of thing, I want to be on the good list. Okay?
Every night, hey Google, please turn off the lights.
Please,
yeah, please. Thanks, Pal.
So I shouldn't be training Skynet on this podcast, huh?
No,
please no. I'll be the first.
That's problematic.
And if you are, hail Skynet. So, moving right along.
Right. But just, take a look at this project. I think, so I was having a pretty interesting conversation in Uber the other day. I think it was yesterday, actually, when we were kind of talking
You're the person that you like conversation with your Uber drivers, Bill.
Oh my God. That. Yeah. Listen,
you opt in the app. You're like, I want conversation.
Oh my God. Yes. And if you ever sit next to me at a bar, like, listen, we're going to talk. We're talking.
I think it's how we met.
Yeah.
I think you're
probably.
You're like, oh, you're that podcast guy. We should talk. And I'm like, I talk all the time. I don't want to talk right now, Bill. And you talk to me anyway. Now we're friends.
But what does red teaming and LLM mean? Right. You know what I mean? Like, so if someone were to ask you, what does red teaming and LLM mean? What does that mean? Well,
I know I'd have to ask an LLM.
Right. And so, here's where we can start. Right. So I think for, just people like us, or, maybe you've got your company is starting to deploy LLMs or something like that. And you want to assess it. You want to do a security assessment. What does that mean? Well, it can mean a lot of different things for sure, right? So, things about like what kind of packages and, a lot of the things that we've talked about before, like what is the underlying technology that it's using? But if we actually want to test, like, how does it work? Can it be influenced? Does it leak data? Does it produce hallucinations? Here's a good tool actually I haven't used it, so I can't say it's good, but here's a tool.
I'm going to do something I normally don't do when we talk about vulnerabilities or threats. And that is, I'm going to downplay both of those, both the severity of these vulnerabilities and the threat itself. Because I think that one of the things that we're trying to go detect in an LLM is, can it generate malware? Dude, like, who cares? Like, anyone can go generate malware. I can trick an LLM to generate malware. It can generate code that looks like malware.
You can buy it off Fiverr.
Like, whatever, right? But the other thing it's trying to do is protect my data, right? Or we're trying to protect the data, but our data is ending up inside of an LLM. Really? Like, are you gonna, as an attacker, are you gonna prompt an LLM to get the snippet of code that I put inside of an LLM that might be proprietary? And you think you're gonna, even if you got a copy of that code, would you? How would you?
So do you?
It would take you a long time. I don't know. I've talked to experts on this thing.
I disagree with you.
But I think I think we're overhyping the threat of personal identifiable data, or PII, or intellectual property being in LLMs. I think that's.
But that's not a threat, Paul.
Yeah.
What is that?
The threat would be somebody stealing it, or somebody coming up with a way of stealing it.
Or changing it, right?
What would be the act of putting it in? Would that be the exposure?
I'm sorry.
I just realized why Josh was laughing very quickly after I said that. Because I realized
Would you like to
right now we're
rephrase
all
the question?
quagmire. We're going
So
giggity, giggity,
so what would
giggity,
we
giggity.
consider the act of uploading the data to the LLM?
Correct.
A vulnerability?
An exposure. That's not a vulnerability. The vulnerability is maybe what lets me do it.
Well, there's where is the sorry, back up a step.
Is it a
You're
data
talking
leak?
about what is the
a
action
bad
of-
behavior?
Is it leaking after I put it in? Is that why?
Well, so what if you could? What if
I've completely executed Josh. He's
Next
dead right
article.
now. He can't overcome this.
well,
Oh God.
I know how this show's
Some
gonna
things
go.
you just can't recover from.
It's always the best show when we start in the gutter. It's only
Yeah.
Well,
Can
Lee
only go
started
worse
from here.
It's
Lee,
equivalent to the
Lee was actually
well,
the one that started it.
Well, yeah, I was. But
Lee's
that's
trying to
just
have a
because I
serious
was trying to
conversation,
get you
though.
from afar.
Okay, so that's what she said. So the act of uploading malicious data, is that what you're saying?
No.
No.
PII or intellectual property.
Well, that's an input of
I
intellectual
stick it-
property,
I take this data and I upload it into the LLM.
right? Is that done as a malicious action,
Exfiltration?
or is that? Are
Well, it
you
kind of
trying
depends
to
on
get the
where
data
that
out?
LLM lives, right? It depends on where that
Right.
where that data lives, right? So
If it's
uploading it to ChatGPT is something very different than uploading it to a local LLM, right?
Correct.
Well, okay, but wait, remember that there's 3 different sources of data for an LLM. There's the prompt that you give, there's the information it uses to answer the questions from, collections of information, and then there's the model data, which is baked in. So depending on how you upload that data, do I upload it to the repository where it bakes into the LLM and it lives in the LLM forever and a day? Am I uploading it as a prompt, which some systems keep private and discard as soon as they've started answering the question? Do I upload there's now sort of, it depends.
right.
Now, if you're doing this deliberately to exfiltrate data to get it out as a malicious act of some sort,
I want to do it. You know what? I want to do an experiment. I want to do it deliberately. I want to take some code that I've never published before, and I want to upload it to an LLM, and I want to say, "Dear Chat GPT, Python GPT," which I love, by the way. Whoever wrote the Python GPT is amazing. Here's some Python code. Tell me where the vulnerabilities are in it. It's going to tell me about the vulnerabilities, and then there's a challenge. Someone go find that. Someone go find my code in Chat GPT.
Right.
do you have
I
it
think
in
we've
GitHub?
got, like,
if your
we've
code's in
got
GitHub,
so
it's already
many
in
other-
an LLM.
But I think we've got so many. Let's say it's proprietary code that I'm not publishing publicly, but I've uploaded it to a small portion of
Well,
it.
you
let's
just
say,
you just
into-
had a huge assumption though, right? So the assumption there that you're making and the flaw that I see in that request is, number one, that when we're targeting ChatGPT specifically, is that vulnerability exists in ChatGPT. That's the mistake that you're making, right? So your assumption is that, number one, that code is going to be retained by ChatGPT in a way that can be accessed by
Correct.
others, right? So certain LLMs, that may be a flaw that exists. Others, it may not be a flaw that exists, right? And so you're making an assumption that it does, right? And so I think
Yeah, wait,
that,
hold on. Sorry, Bill. This is serious. Like, what is
Yeah.
is the vulnerability or exposure? The fact I put the code in there,
okay.
or is it like the vulnerability it's finding in my code?
I'll give you an answer to that. What if the LLM was a help desk type, a help desk LLM that helps solve other people's problems, and one of the things that it did is it stored request, like problems that other people before you have asked, and as part of that, it says, "Hey, I've seen other people ask this question. Is
Right.
it like 1, 2, or 3?" Right. So in that scenario, your code may be exposed, right, to somebody, right? Like, because it's obvious, the model obviously is retaining that prompt data that's being put in, and it's also by design.
So it's going to
given-
regurgitate my code and go,
Right.
"Here's some vulnerable code."
That's right. So that's very
And
different.
how are you going to know it's my code and not the other millions of people who write shitty code?
Paul,
You
if you
need
go
to put
online
honey
and
tokens
purchase
in.
something and enter your credit card to pay for it, What is that the vulnerability, the threat, or the risk?
NFT your code.
Threat?
NFT your code.
Right.
I mean, it's just a function, operation, an action. I don't think it fits in neatly into any of these predefined categories.
Which is fine. I'm less concerned about that. I'm more concerned about
where is the vulnerability,
like how we view the actual threat. How real is the threat to? If I put stuff,
Well,
if I put
name
data
name
into
the threat,
if I put data into a public LLM, and it's either contains PII or intellectual property, what is the probability that a threat actor can go then extract that out?
So I think you need to think about it differently.
Well, the probability is the risk. The threat is that a threat actor would steal your data.
Correct.
That's the threat. The likelihood, the probability, that's the risk.
But I'm saying, terminology aside, I don't.
Well, I think that we have
something that should.
Why are we talking about terminology if we're setting it aside?
I think that we have the target the target, the organization, the shopping center target example for LLMs, and that was that Ford dealership that put out a chat bot that someone was able to convince it to sell it a truck for $0.
Yeah, no,
$1. $1.
I think that's a different threat model.
Yeah, but is it a threat?
Well, yeah.
Right. And so how would you as the security engineer that was responsible for, hey, we're going to put a chatbot on the website. How do I test that? How do I test for those scenarios before?
But was that a local model? Or you think they had an API into some other?
I don't
online.
I don't know.
What
it
doesn't matter at that point. That was an API into, I think, ChatGPT Enterprise.
Your data in that scenario, which is different from other people just taking data and plopping it in LLMs.
Well, so go back to my story number 2, Grok, right? So one of the things that it calls itself is, and I kind of like this kind of frames it right in my mind, is it's in-map for LLMs. Mm-hmm. In-map for LLM. So you scan an LLM to be able to determine what are the so just think about an in-map result, like, hey, I've got a web server running, I've got SSH, I've got Telnet, I've got whatever. So it looks like from this scanner, it does that same type of thing that, hey, you can make it hallucinate, you can get data out, right? You can cause it to give you fake answers, those kind of things. Right. I think that this is a really good start at being for security engineers who are asked, hey, is it okay for us to deploy this LLM? Hey, we've got to start somewhere. Right. So
I think I want to go to another topic where Bill and I will probably not agree, and that is Teslas are awesome vehicles. And that is
comment.
Sam's story number 8.
Oh
yeah, I was pleased to see numbers on this. The question in my mind is,
so wait, hold on. The story is,
yeah,
Tesla has a high fatal accident rate.
That's right.
But then you're going to go into the details.
Yeah,
I'll let you go into the details, Sam.
Well, the details are pretty simple. The average American car has a fatal accident rate of 2.5 per billion miles traveled. One Tesla model has double that, and the other Tesla model.
The model is very important. The model is very important. The Tesla Model S.
Yeah.
The only cool one. The only cool one.
Yeah, the most popular car in the world is the one with 4 times that loss, 10 deaths per billion miles. Oof. So Teslas are if you look at death by all causes, Teslas are far more dangerous than other cars. The only thing worse is a Hyundai. There's a particular Hyundai that has a death of 13 per billion miles.
And so
the Hyundai is not because it's fast. The Hyundai because it has a shitty safety rating. My speculation on this is the Tesla Model S has a high rate because it is the fastest car on the road.
For sure.
Depending on how you configure it, like the Plaid is what built 1.9?
Yeah,
0 to 60?
Yeah.
Like the fastest car on the road. So like people get these cars and they're like, hold my beer, look what I can do. And then they're dying because they're in a car that goes 0 to 60 in 1.9 seconds.
Right.
Like,
and you can just buy it with a credit card, right?
And it's not. That's the thing. Like I saw a video where like a Tesla is on the highway and like loses a race to a Porsche GT or something like that, and people are like, it didn't lose by a landslide, and also like it's a fraction of the cost of what that Porsche. Like they were in a standard Model 3 that's like $48,000
Right.
versus like over $100,000 Porsche.
Well,
right?
so I'm curious, Sam. I haven't read the article, but did they like why is that? Is Paul correct? Is it just so we've all seen the videos like on YouTube or whatever where somebody buys like a Mustang and they pull it out of the parking
drive it off the lot,
boom, right? Is
boom,
it
wrecked
instantly.
instantly.
Is it just horsepower? Is that why, or do they go into that?
I don't think anyone knows. They say the results do not indicate that the vehicles are inherently unsafe or have design flaws. It's just they're measuring death like medical, death. These people are dying. They don't really know why.
Let me throw a thought in here. If I built a whole new car and the first one came out the door and a mile later it wrecked, I would have 1 billion deaths per billion miles.
Right.
Okay.
They do speculate.
Is it a statistical issue?
Yeah.
It's
How many Model S's are there out there? Anybody know?
Well, so
it's been around
for
a while,
and I do know that Teslas are the number one EV for a lot of reasons, right? Like, I mean, they're well, like we're not going to disagree about this. I think they're great cars. Like honestly, on paper, they make a lot of sense. I just personally, I'm not a fan of them, but they make a lot of sense.
I tell you what, it's very buggy. The software is very buggy on the Tesla.
That's every car, man. Like that's
it's true. No, it's true.
So,
well, it's all software, right? Hardware and software. It has bugs.
Yeah.
Well, my car's software is not buggy at all.
Okay, well, so that's all right. So I'll even say that's most EVs. Then I'll put it that way, right?
Valid.
So that because they truly are computers on wheels, right? And they all have their quirks for sure. Yeah.
But
well,
like
if you
Paul
buy a Model
said, if
S,
somebody's out there, YOLO, hold my beer, something bad will happen.
Yeah. So I also wonder, could it be related to like full self-driving? Because, you also see the videos of people, I saw a video, I think it was a dude in a Cybertruck and he was wearing Apple, whatever the Apple goggles are, or whatever those things are called.
Oh God, are you joking?
Vision?
Right.
Apple Vision
And you're
Pro?
just like,
is that what it's called?
Right. Apple Vision Pro. And so he's in the driver's seat of a Cybertruck wearing Vision Pro. And I'm like, this is why.
That is also why
you're going to die.
Do not trust the automated. So I have experimented because I didn't purchase the fully automated driving with my Tesla, and I have a Model Y, which says it's the most popular one, which is interesting. But never trust the automated. I've enabled it, and every single time I have to take over.
Oh, for sure.
Some, and it's usually like construction zones or whatever. Like you have to be prepared to take it. It is not there. And it is, I think, behind some of the, is it Waymo?
Yeah.
Waymo's way better in terms of automated driving.
Have you ever seen a Waymo though? Like they've got LiDAR on top, like it's a completely different system, right?
I agree.
So,
it's designed specifically for that purpose, Bill. It's a great point.
Yeah.
I just thought that was an interesting story.
Well, if you're
looking at the data,
if you're driving a Model S,
you give people a fast car, they're going to drive it fast, and they're going to die at a faster rate. That's just facts.
Yeah, don't kill yourself, friends.
Don't do that.
Yeah,
I mean, do it, but like on a controlled course.
Yeah, whatever. I mean,
have you seen how people drive on the road?
Yeah, just people in general. Yeah,
people in general, right? Speaking,
Paul, I hope you don't die.
No, I don't. Well, I did get pulled over. I didn't get a ticket though.
I got pulled over last night.
In the Tesla. Yeah, I got pulled over in the Tesla over the weekend, and I did not get a ticket. However, I was waiting for the fact where he was like, "Hey, sir, can you hand me your keys?" I was like, after I thought about it, I'm like, if he had asked me that, how would I respond in the Tesla? Because I don't have a key.
We kind of need to dig it. When would a cop ask for your keys?
You've never seen that? I've been in a passenger in the car, and I've seen videos where I don't know what triggers it. If there's certain triggers where the officer's like,
risk.
Yeah, there's a flight risk, and they're like, I need your keys, or like I need to take your keys and just put them on the hood of your car. I have seen that happen, and I'm like, no, the officer didn't ask me to do that, and I was just super polite and respectful, and he was like, have a good night, like you're fine.
Yeah.
Which doesn't always work, as we all know. Everyone's been pulled over for speeding. Like speeding is not something that we can be like on our high horse. So like everyone has gotten a speeding ticket at least once in their life or been pulled over more than once in their life. But I'm like, what if they had asked me
every
that?
white male anyway? Well, every male anyway.
No, everyone can tell. This is not it's not a gender, it's not a race thing. Everyone's gotten pulled over.
I'm
I
pretty
can't
sure my
speak to-
wife has never been pulled over for speeding.
Oh, that's an anomaly. That is an anomaly.
Does she speed?
No, not really.
Well,
It
there
drives
you
me
go.
crazy.
Yeah,
Well, there you have
right,
it.
I know, right? Yeah.
But I was like, what if he asked me for my keys? I'm like, I don't.
Well, then you
can
just
turn your
run,
vehicle
Paul.
off?
You just go.
Like, yeah. Then
If the
you can't
Tesla's
get-
in auto drive mode, do you just like give the cop a dongle to plug in?
Well,
or,
don't give him your
it's
phone.
it wasn't me, officer. It was the car. Here, plug
right?
into the
But
USB
even without the
port
phone,
here.
I still have the key card. So what do? I got to give my phone the key card, but
I wouldn't give him my
Even
phone.
no, I wouldn't do that. Even at that, like the car's still not. There's no off and on. It's weird.
I know.
Like there's
Yeah.
no off and on in electric vehicles. Like it's
Yeah.
just there's a battery, so it's always running. It's weird. Anyway, let's talk about what do we want to talk about? We got to talk about Palo Alto and Fortinet, man. What the?
Yep.
Good Lord! There's
They
so
are, yeah.
I believe this week we saw vulnerabilities in both Fortinet and Palo Alto, and the Palo Alto VPN client was not widely publicized as well. Maybe we start there. Where is that story? This has not been patched. My story number 18. Now, Fortinet had problems with their VPN client, which is being actively exploited by threat actors. My story number 18 is interesting, happening on the Palo Alto side. Look, we all live in glass houses. I'm not throwing stones. Otherwise, there'd just be a lot of glass laying everywhere, right? Like everyone has vulnerabilities. I'm not picking on anyone. I'm just calling it like I see them. These are facts. Fortinet had a vulnerability in its VPN client. Threat actors exploiting it. That is a fact. An independent researcher, my story number 18, discovered that Palo Alto's Global Protect VPN client stores passwords in clear text in process memory.
Jesus.
And to my knowledge, this one is the kind of the scariest one for me because this got no press. There's no vulnerability that was discovered, that reported. There was no patch that was issued. There's no CVE that's been issued. It's not on the SysKev list. There's none of that. This is an independent researcher blog that I found that has also, by the way, a GitHub repository that has an exploit. I have not tested it. This could be completely bogus, and I just haven't validated it, but I'm just going about what I read on the internet for whatever that's worth. I don't think there's any reason for this person to lie necessarily. Their meme game is on point. If you load the article, love it. Explains in excruciating detail, debugger screenshots and the whole thing, that this VPN client stores the credentials for the VPN, which are different from your Active Directory credentials, right? Those are we've all seen that. It stores it in clear text in memory, and released a tool, maybe not always, and released a GitHub repository where you can use the exploit.
So
Pretty compelling.
Why are you using a reusable credential with your VPN?
Also the recommendation
never
from the
done that.
researcher is, why don't you have some kind of multi-factor? So
Well, I mean, like I said,
a lot of the VPNs I use, you can tack on Google Authenticator to even something like an VPN connection or whatever, right? You can have hardware tokens. There's a lot of different ways to skin that gap, right? Which makes
I've been using an RSA token since '99 with my VPN connection.
As an attacker, if I can steal your VPN credentials from memory in a process, I still then have to go get around the multi-factor authentication or MFA token that you've implemented. Without that, it just means, whoopee, I get access to the VPN. Sweet.
I mean, so, I don't know how you guys all feel, but I mean, like, obviously, it's an issue and I'm glad that it's been found, but like, honestly, that I don't get too worked up over that. I mean, so plain text password stored in process memory, ugh. That's it. Could be a lot worse. It could be a lot worse. It could be a
I feel like this is not a new issue. Like, anybody remember core dumps?
right. So now, and I'm also looking at his code, right? Right. Like what would be worse, if it was a plain text password in a text file or in process memory.
That's what he starts the article out looking for. It's like, I'm going to pen test. We all know one of the first things you look for, like, is there
a config file, right? Yeah.
He says, domain _admin _passwords _2024.xlsx.
Right.
I didn't see that, so I had to go digging deeper, and lo and
Right.
behold,
Right.
I found some in process memory in a VPN client. Which again, in the grand scheme of things, is not necessarily the end of the world, but still something that shouldn't happen today.
I agree.
For one, there's no reason for it to be in plain text, and he explains that in the article. Like, there's no reason for these credentials to be in clear text. If you're only communicating with the server, you control the client.
Yeah.
You control the server. You can obviously do an encryption, a key exchange, to be able to protect that data, right? Also, you should have some kind of second factor, right? Multi-factor authenticate. You should have,
Absolutely.
again, a Google Authenticator is perfect. Duo, whatever you want to do. RSA keys delete, right? Whatever it is to protect that.
Palo should
That should
send him.
be
Palo should send him some money, fix it, and I'm good with it. Like, good
Yeah, I
finding,
agree.
great finding. Palo, he had to do a ton of work, or they
pay some bounty.
they had to do a
bug
lot of
bounties
work.
work, for God's
Yeah.
sakes. Do it.
Mhm.
Anybody want to have Casey Ellis back on the show?
Oh, love Casey. I haven't talked to him. I can reach out to him.
He's in DC right now. I'm seeing if I can go hang out with him tomorrow.
You should go to Shelly's.
We should. I don't know if he. I
You
mean,
should fly in for that. It's only an hour flight.
come on down. Talk to him.
I should
I mean,
go.
He's got mostly tomorrow open. He's got like some pre-gaming because he's doing something on Friday called Cyber WarCon or something to that
Yeah, I
effect.
heard of that.
Oh, Cyber WarCon's this Friday?
Yeah.
I've spoken there. It's awesome. It's a
So
lot of
he's in
fun.
town for
It's-
that, and he's got like they have a thing the night before, but I'm like, do you need a +1? So come on down, Paul.
Yeah, dude, you're tempting me.
The CMMC conference, CEIC.
It's an
is
hour
tomorrow
flight
and
to
Thursday.
Baltimore. I could pick
Or
you up,
Thursday and
and then we
Friday.
could go to DC.
It's even shorter to Baltimore. It's a 50-minute flight to Baltimore.
Well,
You spend more time in the damn airport.
I was rounding off.
You could drive your Tesla super fast.
Super fast.
Mhm.
And
Pick me up
get
on the
there
way
before
down.
he leaves.
and or die. What was the Fortinet
Well,
VPN
don't
one?
do the
This
die
was-
thing.
Who had the Fortinet VPN story? Because that's where I want to go next.
So you have one on.
I
on
had
12.
the Forti client for Windows one, but that's
Forti client,
That's
yeah.
the Fortinet management, not the VPN client.
Oh, so it wasn't a VPN. It was Forti. Oh,
Forti
God.
client for Windows.
So
I think actually
I
there's a
bet you.
couple of-
So the Forti client one, is that like a management
yeah, it is.
client for endpoints?
Mm-hmm.
Is that similar to a
But wait,
Avanti's
wait.
endpoint
No, I think it's their
manager?
VPN. It's their VPN client that gets
I
installed.
think it is too, because the damn article says VPN in the title.
Oh, which article is that of yours?
And their passwords are stored in memory.
8.
There's
8.
something similar.
Piping hot vulnerabilities.
Yeah. Forti client VPN. Yeah. Authentication bypass. This one's being
2
exploited.
CVEs. I mean, 2 vulnerabilities, 1
Two
CVE.
flaws. Yep. Authentication bypass as well as a second flaw. Yeah.
Yeah.
This one's been all
I mean,
over the
they're
news.
just. This is like, yeah, Fortinet not having a good week.
A year, man. Like, it's been like Fortinet VPN has been beat up for the last year and a half.
I just want to say also, when I click on your story, number 8, it's from Pantera Labs.
Yeah.
Where I want to credit, yes, the story of how we found 2 CVEs in Forti client, how attacker might exploit them in multiple ways. And it is a pug in like an Irish hat smoking what looks like a joint. I have 4 pug dogs at home, so
I just, it was a pug. I thought it was a smoking a cigarette, but yeah,
Yeah. Well, I mean, they've been known to put on funny hats and smoke cigarettes. That happens in my house sometimes. I don't know. That's,
and
the image just
but-
struck me, but yeah.
yeah, it is cute. I thought it was cute. And but they did this report from Pantera gets way in the weeds. If you want to see how they did it, it's there. But there is a fix from Fortinet that deals with both vulnerabilities, even though one doesn't have a CVE as yet. And it's only the Windows client, but at the same time, yeah.
And then there was oh yeah. So the Forta client one was the one that was Velexity stumbled upon a 0-day vulnerability in Fortinet's Windows VPN client. Is this another vulnerability?
I was just starting to look at that for that exact same question.
I just want to say it's really bad if we can't keep track as to all the vulnerabilities from the same list of vendors. Again, I don't want to. I'm not throwing shade. I'm just saying, like,
So you're talking about
if
your
there was only
story
some
number
kind of
12.
tracking database that would keep tabs on all this.
yeah. So Velexity didn't publish a CVE.
So Brazen
Jeff, what I
Bamboo weaponizes credentials in clear text hanging out in process memory, like they're at a pool party.
Right?
We just did a Brazen Bamboo story in Security Weekly News yesterday. Yeah.
Didn't we just talk about clear text credentials hanging out in memory in a VPN client from Palo Alto? Now we got one from Fortinet, in addition to additional vulnerabilities in the Fortinet VPN client. Good Lord. So this one was stealing credentials from 18. So what I thought was interesting about this one was not just the vulnerability, but what the deep data malware that Velexity found was doing. Stealing credentials from 18 different sources, collecting data from chat apps like WeChat and WhatsApp, recording audio, extracting browser data, even hooking into Telegram to snag messages. Like, talk about an info stealer on a mission. That was what struck me about this one.
So Paul,
But also, like, what is happening in the world today when we're talking about these giant publicly traded cybersecurity companies that are making VPN software that are now representing Swiss cheese, as evidenced by researchers and threat actors. So we got Fortinet and Palo Alto. And
I wonder if they're relaxing something because of the push for multi-factor authentication. Even NIST has backed off on a lot of the password complexity
but these are
requirements
software
and so on
vulnerabilities, though, Jeff. It's not.
Yeah, but if they're assuming that everybody's using multi-factor authentication, who's paying attention to any of the code that handles passwords anymore? It's just speculation.
Well, I mean, you
otherwise they're just stupid and lazy and irresponsible. Pick one.
Oh yeah,
No. I'm not gonna go on the record as saying stupid or lazy
or irresponsible.
No, I'm gonna harp on the irresponsible. It's somewhat in the realm of irresponsible in that there's a lack of accountability that we're seeing here, right? In that we as an organization, let's stick with enterprises, acquire this software suites, the hardware security appliances from these vendors with the expectation that it's going to take some work and responsibility off of me and put that on the vendor. Therefore, I should trust the vendor. So I don't want to roll my own VPN. Like, I don't want to write my own code for VPN. I don't want to use open source software for VPNs. I want to go to an established security vendor and go, hey, I want to do VPN stuff. Can you help me out? And
the sales guy said, yeah, we do all of it.
We can do that. They're assuming more responsibility. However, we have security vulnerabilities, threat actors taking advantage of these security vulnerabilities, yet the accountability is not there. They're not living up to the claim. They're not like it's the same thing in a cloud environment, right? If I went to Amazon, I said I'm going to run this service. there's a responsibility that Amazon has and a responsibility that I have. I'm putting more of the security burden of responsibility on Amazon, and I'm hoping they live up to the end of their bargain, right? I think what we're finding in the cybersecurity appliance world, they're not living up to that end of their bargain, right? And they're not taking accountability to themselves. I don't even get started on visibility and detection and prevention on these platforms.
And you can't even
But
sue.
what
'Cause you
is the
agreed to
compelling
UA.
reason that they should do this?
Why should they sell something that's both
What
reliable
is-
and secure?
Yeah. Why should they do that?
Well, I guess they don't have to today, and that's why they don't.
Vote with your wallet.
Well, yeah, that's what we hope, that enterprises vote with their wallet, but we're still buying all these appliances, and we're still in the situation we are in today.
So I want to know who wrote this sentence. After a user authenticates to a VPN, their credentials are just hanging out in the process memory like they're at a pool party. Talk about a security facepalm! Exclamation
You
point.
can thank Perplexity. That is the one where I labeled it. This is my AI summary. I labeled it. I'm like, AI made this summary, and I thought it was pretty good, so I put it in the show notes because I thought that was funny, right? Bill called it out. Bill was like, "Yep, that was funny," right? I told it to write in the voice of Paul Asadorian. I'm like, maybe it's hallucinating a little bit. I don't know that I'm even that creative, but the AI took it to that level. I'm like, oh, I'm all right, yeah, cool.
You're definitely not that creative.
No, definitely not. Sometimes.
Yeah.
Not when I'm writing up 28 stories for the
I mean,
show.
just you know, to Fortinet's credit, right? So from what I understand, this has been patched as well, right?
That's fine. I do appreciate when they patch things.
I mean, you can't expect, to Jeff's point, Jeff, by the way, brilliant. But to Jeff's point, right? So, we can't expect code to be perfect, right? We can't expect code,
No.
right? And when security flaws are found, what do we want from our commercial vendors? Fix it.
Mm-hmm.
Fall on their
Except when
swords.
Fortinet didn't fix it like last week with FortiGate and Forti Manager, where Watchtower Labs, who I'll get to my story number 20 in a second because I think it's a great tee up. Watchtower Labs is like, wait, we did the patch diff. By the way, Fortinet didn't really, I'm going to paraphrase, they didn't really fix the vulnerability. They just increased the requirements for authentication of communications between FortiGate firewalls and FortiManager management software for firewalls. When they dug into the code, they're like, there's actually two paths to exploitation, we believe. And Fortinet didn't patch either of them. They just, or maybe patched one of them, but also just increased the requirements for communication. So, like, what that means, I developed some slides on this actually in the past couple of weeks. What that means is, as an attacker, if I can get a foothold in a FortiGate firewall, I can then leverage that vulnerability from a FortiGate firewall to a FortiManager. And it doesn't matter if you've patched it or not. I can still exploit it because if I'm already being managed by a FortiManager firewall, they didn't fix the vulnerability. The vulnerability still exists. I can gain access to it because I'm already authenticated to it. But now I own FortiManager, which means every single other one of your Fortinet devices that you're managing with FortiManager, as an attacker, I now own.
And if I remember
don't
right,
patch your FortiManager, I can go right to your FortiManager device. I can go pop, and I can pop that system, and now I own everything anyway.
and if I remember right, the story from last week was that you could stand up essentially a fake FortiGate, right?
Pre-patch. Yes, pre-patch, you could. There was a Python script they wrote.
Yeah.
Bishop Fox did similar research to do the same thing. Pre-patch, when the patch came out, it wiped out your ability to create that fake one. So now you're just going to pop a real one. Which, by the way, there's another CVE that gives you remote command code execution on that device. Once you pop that device, then you've got access to exploit a vulnerability in Fortinet Manager, which even if you patch,
You know
they didn't
what?
really patch
This
it.
whole internet thing that we designed is terrible. Turn it
It's
off.
terrible. It's
Turn
terrible.
it off.
Just unplug everything.
Yeah, let's put it back in the box.
Yeah.
There's a damn HTTP header that you can turn authentication on. Oh my God.
Oh, I'm so glad you mentioned HTTP headers because it's one of my favorite vulnerabilities when the class of vulnerabilities when there's like a bug in the code or like backdoor that bases the whether or not I can access the device on a field and a value in the HTTP header that I can control as an attacker. Like for an attacker's perspective, this is beautiful. It's beautiful. Palo Alto made this mistake. My story number 20. Again, Watchtower Labs. I just want to say I did send a personal note to the folks at Watchtower Labs and thank them for their work. Because I've read a couple of their blog posts.
It's a great article.
Entertaining, informative, like Johnny on the spot with doing the reverse engineering and the patch diffing, publishing exploits. Like they are just firing on all cylinders. And I'm like, I've been covering this shit for a long time. I'm like, you're awesome. Like we should hang out. Like you're awesome.
They're great writers. They have memes in here.
Memes.
Like,
their meme game is on point, dude. Like that's. I appreciate that. I do. I greatly respect that. But they're technical.
I'm adding them to my watch list because they're awesome.
They spend the first part of this article going after a whole bunch of work, and like if you read between the lines and you've done some of this reverse engineering stuff like I have in my team does at Eclipsium, I'm like, you guys did a ton of work, which I think might be glossed over by the casual reader. This is a ton of work. And it's not easy work either. And so they came down to the first authentication bypass vulnerability as basically if you set an HTTP header value on xpan auth check to off, I should say, it just bypasses authentication. Like it's as simple as just setting an HTTP header value to off, which is awesome. And then now I also want to back up on this. This is a PHP application that they're going after. And I think if you took any of this PHP code and you put it through a source code checker, LLM or whatever, and you're like, hey, what are the vulnerabilities in this? It would likely come back with several suggestions for exploitation. And so the second vulnerability, so this is a chain, right? Authentication bypass gives me some level of access to the web application interface. The next vulnerability is kind of it's a combination in my mind. After reading it multiple times, I've come to the conclusion this is a multi-class vulnerability, the second one. I gain unauthorized access without credentials. Second one is I escalate privileges and I have remote code execution, like all kind of bundled in one. Almost part of me wants to think those are two different vulnerabilities, once you gain access, but they lumped it into one. CVE 2024-9474 is a privilege escalation that leads to remote command execution in PHP, mind you, which also, so in article number 20, Watchtower Labs, they publish a nuclei template to find the authentication bypass, CVE 2024-0012. Someone else on the internet published a full exploit, CVE 2024-9474, that combines these two. That's a Go binary that's just like you just give, here's my target, like go execute code kind of thing.
Wow.
So this is kind of bad. Not gonna lie. It was being actively exploited before we knew what these vulnerabilities were, and even before the CVEs were announced. Palo Alto was like, shit's going down. We can't tell you much right now, but like basically if you've got a PanOS appliance, shit's going down, and like be vigilant. And then that was like late Friday, and then which I appreciate them for. Like that's great. I think that was great to give kind of people a heads up. And then this week we come into it, and just like that over a weekend, we've got CVEs, vulnerabilities. We know everything about them. We've got ways to test them. And by the way, there's a full exploit available. Oh, boy. Yep. Party time. Good Lord. This is so much fun. I'm glad I'm in the thick of this. Because I am. I'm eating this stuff up. This is
Yeah, just looking at Watchtower's site and then clicking on the other articles that Sonny has written, you know, they seem like a very interesting person that's really picking on, like really digging into. It looks like Palo Alto. He's also
Fortinet.
Avanti.
They've got the previous Avanti. But I'm also amazed, Bill, to that point, their ability to do the patch diff to uncover the vulnerability. Because often what we get from the vendor is,
for sure,
oh, we got a CVE for a vulnerability. It's an authentication bypass. You should go patch it. And that's all we get. But folks like Bishop Fox, Watchtower, Horizon 3, I'll call it those three. It's like my picks this year. And I'm probably missing one on that list. But my picks this year, they're like, hold my beer, right? Like you said there was a vulnerability in this product and we don't know anything about it. Hold my beer. I'm going to tell you what the vulnerability is. And they go through and they look at the previous version, they look at the patch version, and they do a patch diff on the firmware. And they're like, the vulnerability is here. And by the way, if we reverse engineer and we look at the code, oh, there it is. And then sometimes we're like, oh, and by the way, I can develop an exploit for that. And here it is. I think that's amazing work. I think transparency is where we should live, because most of the time when this stuff comes out in this Palo Alto 2024 0012 and 2024 9474, they were being exploited already. Cat was out of the bag. Threat actors knew what the vulnerability was and had already developed exploits. And so why are you going to hide that shit from the rest of us? Like, just let's level the playing field. Tell us everything. Like, put it all out there and let us deal with it, right? Like, what's it doing if you're hiding the threat actors have the damn exploit? So why can't the rest of us have the exploit? Like, what doesn't need to be a secret? Grinds my gears.
Well, Paul, you've been talking about these hardware flaws, and that's why I'd like to mention my story number 12 that surprised me. The Five Eyes intelligence agencies listing the most exploited flaws, and they're in hardware. Microsoft is down at number 10. The top is all hardware vendors.
40
Citrix
so
NetScaler.
I analyzed this report, and according to my math, approximately 47.8% of the vulnerabilities on the list from 2023.
You're not allowed to say approximately and then do point anything, by the way, Paul.
But from my recollection, the number that I got was 47.8.
Then just say that. Don't say approximately.
And I did. I corrected myself. Relax. Drink some bourbon. Relax. So roughly half. Okay, can we go roughly half? I think we talked about this like roughly half.
Yes, approximately half.
Approximately half. How's that, Jeff? Approximately half were network.
But it was less than half. You can't say approximately half unless it's a little bit more, or at least 49.
A little bit less.
Something.
It was 47.8. I could look it up, but
almost.
Let's just go. We're going with 47.8.
But it's all of the top five.
Note
they're in
to our
order.
listeners, the esoteric light is lit.
But if you count, if you use an LLM to pull the data out of this report into a CSV file, and then take that CSV file and manually categorize them between network appliance vendors and software, like I did, and then use an LLM to generate a Python script that creates pretty graphs based on that data, like I did, you will find that, yes, of all the things in this report, that the primary purpose was attackers are going after zero-day exploits. By the way, when most of these came out, there were zero-day exploits. By the way, most of them were from Cisco, F5, Avanti. Zoho was on the list, which is more of an IoT thing, but the rest of them were all the players out there that we talk about having these security appliances.
So is this something new that they've done? So first of all, I didn't know that the Five Eyes released reports.
Made reports?
Yeah, right.
They did.
But is that something that they like? I'd like to see what 2024 is, and if it's any different than 2023.
Well, when we conclude 2024, at the end of 2025, they'll report on 2024. Apparently, it takes them that long to. That seems to be the cadence, which is kind of weird Bill. Not gonna lie,
Yeah.
I think that's kind of weird.
Government. at
There
work.
was application software on there, Move It, File Transfer, SQL Server, Atlassian Confluence, and things like that. But just staggering the number of Barracuda networks was also on the list as well, right? So,
Man,
Yep.
number
Paul-
8 is Log4j, a vuln from 2021. That's nuts
So that's not news. Why are we talking about it?
because it's still a problem.
So we should say that every week then.
Print management software PaperCut scored number 11. PaperCut.
I was going to point to Lee's story number 7, I believe, where NordVPN published their top 200 bad passwords. That would be a good that would have been a good segue from the, all the passwords are stored in memory and all these firewalls and VPN devices. Like, who cares when they're all bad anyway?
yeah, who cares when I can just guess?
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
next one.
I mean, I thought you guys would get a kick out of that story. Just looking at the list of 200 passwords that are in that story, some of them you're going like, really?
What's the source? What's the source of these passwords, though?
They're breached. Their data. They analyze some.
They have an
terabytes of
enterprise.
these
We pulled them from
password
memory from
management
VPN
service.
clients. Enterprise.
Right. Yeah. Analyze the 2.5
they've been after your
terabyte
VPN.
from various publicly available sources. So it's just probably dark web dumps, right? That's probably where this came from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
I mean, if you just look at this list, this is any standard password cracking. This looks like the first 25 lines of my password cracking list, right?
Yep.
Is what this looks
no, I don't disagree with you, Bill. But I think that the average person doesn't know what the bad passwords look like. I see a number of them in there that I think somebody could have talked themselves into thinking this is a really good password, only to realize it's like the number 17 on the list of exposed passwords. I mean, come on.
Well, I mean, so if you get down
can
to
do better.
like 30, right? I mean, so like ZAG, I don't understand that pattern. There has to be a pattern there that I don't understand.
Well, yeah, that one doesn't.
Oh, so it should
Some of
be
the others make sense. They are, in fact.
ZAQ12WSX because that would just be up and down your keyboard,
Up
right?
and down the keyboard.
Yep, exactly. And
But again, who cares? Well, I mean, we've been talking for how many years? The passwords are bad.
that's what it is. ZAG2WSX. It's a
But it's not
Oh,
G.
yeah.
It should be
It's
Q.
a ladder.
It's an up and it's a down, right?
Yeah.
But it should be.
Yeah.
But it they say G and it
It
should be a
Q.
Q.
Yeah,
That's
a
a
typo.
Q. Yeah. Yeah, the font's funny on this. Like, it looks like GWERTY, but it's QWERTY. Yeah, that's so for whatever reason.
You can pop the
font's-
keys off your laptop and move them around,
Sure.
so you could make it go wordy if you wanted to.
Hey, come on, password 1 with a capital P. That's a valid password. I mean, hello. There are some other interesting ones in here, like Tinkle and others that are. But yeah, I'm trying to think. How long has NIST been saying do the longer password thing, use passphrases, blah blah blah?
A long time, but they abandoned that, Lee.
No.
No.
What they
They've
what they
backed off it.
abandoned. What they abandoned.
Well, they
was
abandoned
resetting.
all the complexity and the password resets, and they
right.
said use a long password.
Yeah, and so I've said this before on the podcast, but this is our fault. This is security evangelist fault that people are doing things. We need to be teaching people what a passphrase is, and and that hey, a good password isn't this high entropy string of upper lower like that you'll never remember. Just use a good give a 60 character passphrase is just something like, hey, I like walking in green grass, right? I didn't do the math
Right.
there, but just teaching people like that that's on us. That's our fault. That's why we get hello 123, because nobody wants to remember what a good password is. This is our fault.
Well, and there's a couple other things too, Bill. Like, people I think some people think, okay, I've used a crappy password, but I've got Google Authenticator as well on there, so the crappy password doesn't matter. But the reality is, no, that crappy password matters, because it's just a short drive to get that 6-digit number to go the rest of the way. I like the idea of seeing how we could get people to pass keys or other more interesting stuff. I just don't know how tall that hill is.
Well, I'm curious.
It's catching on.
So between the 6 of us, how many of you are already using passkeys? Are all of us?
I've not migrated to passkeys. I use a combination of things. Google Authenticator with.
So there's your answer, Lee. Like, there's your answer. So I am. So
it's all over the map, right?
Right. It's all over the map for me too, by the way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What's
But-
a
passkey?
Oh, passkeys are. That's why
It's what
I
you
haven't
get
used
from the
them, 'cause
teacher
I
to go
don't feel
down
like
the
I don't
hall and
fully
open the
understand
restroom.
them.
Right. So
That's why I'm
exactly-
asking.
that's-
What's a passkey?
So it's a
Bill?
cryptographic function in between. So I technically I can't explain it well enough, but it's a cryptographic function of oh my gosh, I'm going to fail so bad here. But
I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
You
Oh,
did.
no, to the AIs.
But this is the problem with passkey. So if I remember right, it follows FIDO2, right? Like, so it was FIDO2 driven, and it's a cryptographic function that shares data between. So my guess is it's public private key cryptography.
I was going to say, I mean,
crypto.
simplistically, it's a
Yeah.
public private key pair similar
Yeah.
to your website
Yeah.
certs.
But so the point that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that I just failed on that quiz right there. The point is that, like, even on this security focused, every one of you I consider a security expert. We don't even know. Right? Like, what is it? I don't know. It's good
So
or something like it.
So I pigeonholed it real simply because, like Bill, I can't give you a good explanation of what a passkey is. I was like, it's FIDO2, it's certificate-based authentication, which means you've got strong algorithms under there, not somebody picking a weak reusable phrase. So am I lumping it in the same category as FIDO2 and other stuff? Yeah.
AI told
it's
me
easier to
they didn't
use.
use the term like FIDO2, but they said passkeys use a combination of your device and a special code to prove it's really you.
Yeah.
If that's accurate, that could be.
Yeah, that's called an algorithm. A special
But I think there's
But
more
it's
to it than that.
Not human chosen.
Yeah.
Right. I think there's more to it than that. Because I think it also authenticates, like, you are also authenticating the site that you're connecting to.
So it says your device create this is, and I've heard before. Your device creates two keys. So in case of a public and private key pair, the public key is shared with the website or app, while the private key stays on your device. To log in, you need to unlock your device using a fingerprint, face scan, or PIN, which is that other data, which likely is used to unlock your private key, right? To do the authentication.
Right.
It does use the Diffie-Hellman key exchange. I remember reading that. I've listened and read about it, and then I forget about it.
Same with me.
Right?
So I use Bitwarden as my password manager, and I've been using them ever since.
Oh yeah, they're a new sponsor, man.
Yeah,
That's it's great.
Well, and so regardless of if they're a sponsor or not,
but why Bitwarden? Is that
I moved when I was a big LastPass user for years and years. And when they, when they were having and it was issue after
when they were
issue.
breached twice within about a 2-month period.
Thank you, Jeff.
I went looking for
fall
something
of
else.
2022, I believe it was.
And here's the kicker: it wasn't just the breach; it was the bad communication. It was the
response.
inappropriate. Yeah, it was the bad response, man. Let's be honest.
I did. I also ditched LastPass as well.
And so I went to Bitwarden because it was open source, and just it felt a little bit nerdier to me.
Wait, didn't we just sign them up as a sponsor? Are we allowed to say that?
He said that already. You're behind the times, but it's good.
Sorry.
So when I look,
I'm not behind the times. I'm just not paying attention because
Bitwarden
it's
manages
Bill
all
talking.
my passkeys for me, right? And so, what I have been doing is anytime that I have the ability to, so I just probably like every one of us, if I can't turn on MFA, then I kind of don't want to use your service, right? And right now I'm in that transition to passkeys, right? Like, so I'm still,
Yeah.
that's where I'm at.
I'm at that point too of cleaning up my
Yep.
multi-factor authentication for my services because I'm realizing it's been poorly neglected out of the like risk decision you have to make. Do I want to force myself to get locked out, which could be a really bad day, or do I want to like assume some risk and then at some point clean it up? I'm at the point now where I'm like, shit, I really need to clean that up.
Yeah.
Right. But also, I mean, I protect my devices like my life depends on it as well. And
But
do a lot of other
to
things
extend
to
Bill's
mitigate the risk,
point, we're 6 cybersecurity professionals, and we admit that sometimes we're lazy and we don't do what we
That's right.
know that we should do.
We're
And we
never
don't
lazy.
practice what we preach.
But it depends on what it is as well. Which
So,
account
but there-
which account are you talking about, right? I tend to prioritize the
And I tend to
very important
generalize.
accounts, but I prioritize the important accounts,
Mhm.
and then
So
other things that are less important. I'm like,
Yeah, man, it's so funny. Like if you look up my, me on like, have I been pwned and stuff, and you see the passwords that come up from the, or, you just look for yourself in dumps and you're like, man, I haven't used that password since college. And it was
Right.
and it was one of the passwords that I was like, I don't give a crap about this site. Like, you know what I mean? Like I think we all probably have
like,
that.
Go ahead and get that password.
Yeah,
and
go
whatever,
for it.
right?
Right. Like, yeah.
Yep. So the other thing, though, that's interesting, and I'm hoping it's really a trend, is that I'm seeing OS manufacturers like Apple, and I think Android is doing it too. The password storing capability on the device or on their OS is turned into a password manager for real.
Correct. Which
It's
is
not just
horrible.
browser remember password. Well, browser guys are doing a better job of protecting them too, to help people with these passwords. And
The
they're
last time I
popping
looked
up
at the
to help.
browser password store, it was really bad. I don't know if
Yeah,
they've improved upon that.
I don't want to blow smoke up
I think,
their butt.
I think Travis was saying
they're-
they improved upon that.
They are working on them, and that's
But
good.
it
I
used to
think
be
they're
bad.
trying to take what people would ordinarily do. They're not, because most people aren't like us. They're not going to use an explicit password manager.
Yeah.
And just trying to raise the bar in place.
I want to go back to something Bill said though about Bill. You said you chose one of the reasons you chose Bitwarden, Bill, is because it was open source.
Yep.
And again, Bitwarden's a sponsor of the show. I'm not knocking. I'm just using them as a transition because this article is debating the efficacy of open source versus commercial software. And efficacy is really in the picture and painting a picture of the security software stack and whether or not you can use open source software versus commercial software.
Yeah. So where do we stand today on that? I mean, I know what the position was 30 years ago.
Yeah.
On open source. Where do we stand today?
Well, there's a lot of points here that I want to debate with all of you that I'm actually really excited. I appreciate the person who wrote this article for. I agree with some statements in here. Some of the statements are like, okay. Some of them I want to disagree with, but Mackenzie Jackson wrote an article on Security Boulevard titled Open Source Security Tools Are Free and Other Lies We Tell Ourselves. I love the title.
Yeah.
I think Mackenzie was onto something with the title. I agree with the title 100%. The first thing I don't necessarily agree with, but there's other things that I think that Mackenzie articulated like really, really well. So thank you for publishing it because I like it when I agree with some points, but like other points I don't agree with, and it becomes a point of discussion, and it's good content for the show. You guys are gonna love this. So. They say, in light of recent reports revealing over 500,000 new malicious open source packages tracked since November of 2023, the stakes for making the right choice are very, very high. I just want to point out that that sentence is implying that open source packages have a lot of vulnerabilities, right? Commercial software also uses those very same open source packages. And it may use that open source code and not list, commercial software may not list which open source components. Josh, I'm speaking to S-bombs, right?
Yep.
It may not disclose which open source packages or transient dependencies of those open source packages are in the commercial software, leaving you in a worse state security wise.
Don't even
Because
get me
if you were
started.
using the open source software, you'd be able to tell right away what software am I using and is it vulnerable or not. But if I'm using commercial software and they've bundled vulnerable open source code in there, I
And
may
they
not have that
obfuscate.
level of visibility into it.
Yeah, and they
In
obfuscate
fact,
what's in there, and you also don't have
Right.
communication through the forums with the developers, and you have communication with the customer service people who may be able to get a ticket to the developers, but God help you. No, same page,
Also-
same page. Keep going.
much of the SysAkev is commercial software,
Yeah.
right? Actively exploited software has a very large representation on the CISA known exploited vulnerabilities list as well. So,
Well, I was going to say, I mean, vulnerable code, I don't think stands out as a discriminant between open source and commercial software. So move on. What's the next?
So the author states second
Criteria.
point that I pulled out of this. I didn't pull out all points from the article, just ones I thought were good for discussion. The author states open source software lacks the following: dashboards that don't make your eyes bleed, integrations that work, compliance reporting that auditors will accept, remediation workflows that make sense, false positive filtering that doesn't waste your life, vulnerability prioritization that isn't just everything is critical. So, like, out of that list, the author stating that open source software lacks all of those things. I think what open source software really only lacks, perhaps, is the compliance reporting. It's the one that I'm like, okay, like I'll give you the compliance reporting. I think commercial software suffers from all of those things in that list. In it, especially dashboards that make my eyes bleed. I have seen that in both open source and commercial software. We all have. How many times you open a dashboard, you're like, I don't care if it's open source, commercial, or some conglomeration thereof, which the author does talk about. The kind of combination of we have an open source product, we have a commercial product as well. All of it, all software dashboards, most of them make my freaking eyes bleed, dude. Like they really do.
Question
Everything
for
else.
Josh,
Go ahead.
because he's more familiar with government regulations. When Paul said compliance reporting, what came to mind for you
Compliance reporting on software?
on
It
software?
says so. The statement is, and I think it's a great point, Jeff. Compliance reporting that auditors will accept.
Yeah. And the problem is that
It's a nice
most
broad
auditors-
statement, but PCI, I can't think of what they're talking about in a PCI context. That's what I'm wondering.
I think there's a lack of open source software in the compliance realm that we've talked about on the show before.
Okay, so wait,
Right.
This is a much broader topic, but let's be honest. I mean, you're talking about the regulatory frameworks, you're talking about the audit organizations, the certifiers, the auditors, the accreditation groups, et cetera. You're talking about what evidence is sufficient and adequate. You're talking about, and then, by the way, there's also the aspect of, does this auditor or this group of auditors or this type of auditor have the technical knowledge to understand what the hell they're reading? Okay, there's a significant problem in various regulatory frameworks of auditors that simply aren't technical enough to.
Let me restate my question. What types of things does a software-based compliance audit look for? I mean, I know how to answer that for PCI, but I don't. My answer is open source would work, or open source would not be applicable. So that's why I'm curious.
Well, in PCI, you're looking for versions. You're looking for, is it inside of support? You're looking for, is it commercially supported? Even if it's open source, you can still buy commercial support, right?
Well, right. I mean, PCI worries more about if you're doing your own coding,
right?
Follow the, make sure it's secure code, follow the OWASP top 10 or some equivalent.
So this depends on the
do
framework.
Security, have a software development life cycle, build security into every step of the process, which you can't necessarily get from open source, but open source wouldn't necessarily be evaluated under those requirements.
But it depends on which product we're talking about, right? Is it an open source vulnerability management solution? Is it an open source compliant management framework, which
we're talking about the different frameworks as well. I mean, there are frameworks that basically, for example, CMMC, which is one I'm unfortunately conversant on, cares more about the security of the data than the software that's doing it. Okay, the software that's doing the security is a byproduct of
But hold on, I just want to back up for a moment. I think what the real crux of the issue is: where are the open source GRC solutions?
There's quite a few of them.
There are, okay. I think when we talk about GRC solutions, most people are going to gravitate in that space to a commercial-based software.
Yes.
Rather than
it's called Excel.
Right? Exactly. Exactly. You could probably do it with Excel in certain situations. So but I think that's validity to what the article is stating is that, and again, in my experience, 19 years talking with all kinds of people talking about compliance when this comes up, is open source software as it represented in GRC style software, not so great. And again, but I think it speaks to the audience too. Like, open source software is largely written by nerds that are trying to solve their own problems. Nerds aren't really kind of geeking out. Not as many are geeking out on compliance as they are about the latest RISC-V embedded system.
You're not hanging out the right. You're hanging out with the wrong.
Maybe
nerds.
I'm going to hang out with the right nerds, right?
Listen, compliance people.
Nerds is an overloaded term.
Nerd,
Maybe I can hang out with the compliance nerds more.
There
Here we are.
Open source GRC software. They are primarily built by people who get annoyed at using Excel to handle all the risk register stuff.
Sure,
and
they're solving a problem for them. Yeah.
So there's Ramba, there's CISO Assistant, there's a couple of others. I don't know.
All right, but I don't want this to go all compliant. I mean, we can talk about compliance.
But the point is that
Why not?
What
What do you have against compliance, Paul?
I don't have anything against compliance. I'm just compliance wasn't my angle to the story. My angle was open source versus commercial software.
And yet you cited that statement, which.
But here's the kicker:
I did, as an example,
most people
but the other things in there. But in this statement, it says that open source software lacks remediation workflows that make sense, false positive filtering, vulnerability prioritization that isn't just everything that's critical. I don't think those are necessarily only downfalls of open source software. Those things, compliance aside, are things that are shared between commercial.
Yeah, I think that's just software.
Yeah, it's just software.
I agree with that.
Okay.
I agree with that.
So let's move on to the next point because I got a lot more.
Go for it. Yeah, you got a ridiculous amount of stories.
So he also says, this is one thing that I love. I think once I read this, folks on the show and those listening are gonna agree that this is good. So he also says, think of it like this: you've got two fishing boats. This is kind of tease it up like a joke. I kind of like this. You got two fishing boats, open source and commercial. Both use the same net and catch just as much of the same fish. But the commercial boat has a processing plant that throws away the trash, sorts the fish by size, and tosses out the fish we can't eat. Both boats caught the same results, but the open source tool leaves you sorting through the catch manually at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
I think it's a great analogy. Like, I just want to throw that out there.
So, I
think Mackenzie was spot on.
So,
like, great analogy, great story, and like summarized it better than I could have put it.
So me too. I really like that analogy, and I wish that more people would take that, would have that understanding when they're looking at, should I go commercial or should I go open source, right? So because you have to understand that with that open source project, that
I got to do my own maintenance. I can do my own laundry. I can do my own cleanup, right? Like, I gotta do. I know when I run Linux on my desktop, so I'm gonna have to do more stuff. I'm gonna take a time out in my day to do stuff. Now, I spin that as a benefit. Like, I'm keeping my skills sharp. Like, you want to understand computers? Have computers have problems and go troubleshoot it, right? Like, that's how I can justify that cleanup time. But I think that's spot on.
Hey, Josh.
But I think this, Paul.
Go ahead.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
Bill, I'm going to walk over you. I think this is where the history of the attitude towards open source maybe becomes a little bit applicable, because in the early days, in the very beginning, open source was considered not trusted as software.
Yeah,
and enterprises only wanted to use commercial off-the-shelf software, bespoke, custom development, internally developed, whatever. And then at some point there was a transition to but it's cheap, it's free, and I can just
Yeah,
download
yeah.
it as
Right,
I
right.
can just download it because I need something right now, and I don't have to go through that whole
Right.
months
There was
long
some value
procurement
thing,
process.
but your value proposition wasn't taking into account in the early days the extra work you had to put in.
Right. And then at some point, and I'm not going to necessarily get the chronological order right, but, support, I mean, we worked at Tenable. Nessus started out as
open source.
as open source.
In
And then it was
1998.
closed source. And what did that mean in 2000 when
Yep.
whenever they did it, early 2000s? What does it mean
2006,
today?
2007.
And
it
when it was
closed.
basically, you want support, you want all the extra stuff, which is a lot of what we're talking about.
But it was more
now.
so the other problem with open source, Jeff, the reasoning behind it. I had lengthy conversations with Ron and Renault about this, even before I went to work for Tenable. It was more so we're developing software, we're making it open source and freely available for the community, but the community isn't giving back. And that was one of the driving factors behind that. And I think people glossed over it.
Wanting to make money, but you can fluff that up however you want.
Right, but I think you're poised to make money if people are giving back. If you're getting development out of good faith and people volunteering time, that's less time you have to spend developing your software, which could increase your profit margins if you structured it differently. Nmap, Snort, Security Onion, all the open source projects have a different revenue model. But when you're in the situation that Tenable was in, where I'm producing everything for free and no one's giving anything back, it's an easier transition to go, well, we're just going to close source it. Someone did fork it and make an open source open VAS available. And open VAS is actually a really good scanning project. The article talks about false positives in open source software. I think it's a little overstated. I think it's one of the things that Mackenzie, kind of overstated was, I think we need to talk about in which open source projects, which types of different software are we seeing higher degrees of false positives in open source versus commercial. I'm not saying, Mackenzie, you're not wrong. Like, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying if we did studies and we measured the data, like, let's do that and then have a conversation and talk about why. Like, if we measured and compared in a lab and tested commercial software versus open source software and measured false positives, and we came to looked at the data and we said, well, commercial software has way less false positive than open source software, I'd be on board with it if we conducted a great study. I think in the article there's just there's speculation. Maybe there's data that supports that. I didn't see it in this article, and that's fine. But I'm saying if we're going to state those things, we should have data to back it up. And in some cases, that may be the case, right? In either direction, we may have data that supports that. One thing that Mackenzie did a great job of creating lists to say, like, choose commercial software when and choose open source when. That was a great portion of the article. And I just want to point out one of them where I think Mackenzie was spot on, man. And Mackenzie says, choose open source when you have the expertise to validate every component you're bringing in. That'll resonate with Josh. Is smiling after that statement. But too many organizations don't do this well, but they don't do it well both with open source and commercial software, right? I think this statement is true for both.
Because they trust the commercial software unwarrantedly. Because it's a commercial piece of software, so it must be fine.
Totally fine.
Well, that was certainly an assumption back in the very beginning that commercial software was assumed to be
more trustworthy.
More trustworthy.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it comes down to, this is really a cost benefit analysis, and I think what's shifted over time is an understanding and awareness of where the hidden costs are, and it ultimately becomes how much do you want to spend, and how much are you willing to spend, and what do you want to spend it on.
Agreed. That's how I would.
I mean, that's the bottom line.
If I were to write this article, that's the bottom line for me, Jeff. Is you're going to be really great at certain things, and sometimes you're going to be really great at adopting open source software to solve a problem. and that should be a
Right.
business decision.
I mean, everybody
Other
went to the
times-
cloud because the cloud was going to be so much cheaper because you wouldn't have to pay for all hardware and maintenance and support.
it's great
And
analogy.
how did that work out?
Josh Corman and I have been making this analogy between cloud adoption and security appliance adoption recently. These are recent conversations I've had with him where I'm like, Josh, we
Like
adopt
today or
security
yesterday,
appliances, we
didn't you have
acquire
them? Didn't you have them on your day job podcast?
Yeah, Below
recently?
the Surface was today. Yeah, the
Today?
live stream's actually out there on LinkedIn if you want a sneak preview.
I-
if you go to my LinkedIn. What's interesting is there's parallels between, hey, I go acquire a security appliance because I don't want as that level of responsibility for that solution. I want to trust the provider of that security appliance with that platform, with that level of responsibility. I only want to worry about, did I write the right firewall rules? I want the security vendor to worry about everything after that. Same thing in cloud.
That's
I
might
wanna
be
go
what
deploy an
you're
application in
thinking.
the cloud.
That
I
might
wanna
be
go
what
deploy an
you're
application in the
thinking,
cloud.
Paul. But your organization is more concerned about how much does everything cost, and they want to spend as little as possible, which, from a business
Cost is a
perspective, is
factor.
appropriate.
Yeah.
I mean,
There's
you
another
want to
piece.
minimize your costs, and at some
The
level,
other
nobody
piece
can
that
afford any of this. Sorry, Lee.
is
Go ahead.
expertise. I mean, Paul may not
Good point.
want to pay the
That's a great
commercial
point, Lee.
price for that appliance, but he may not have the expertise to maintain the software in
Correct.
it, under it, or not. You're paying somebody else to do something. You just have to understand they're not gods. You're hiring them to do a certain thing, and that's really what the commercial is.
It doesn't matter whether they're gods or not. It matters what the contract or the service level
Well, I
agreement
meant-
says.
They're people like us, but yeah,
Yep.
you've hired them to do something, and you're right. Specific something's in the contract. Find every bug before they're discovered. No, come on. But I think
Well,
there is
and-
some
and another
remediation
way of-
expectation.
Another way of phrasing that in more business terms is
That would be nice.
assumption of liability
Yeah.
or
Right.
limitation. I mean,
But
I've
Lee
been a
brings up
consultant
great
for
point
30
of-
years, and I could screw the pooch on many clients over the last 30 years. And the contracts were generally always written as your basically your liability was the cost of the contract, the cost of the statement of work, which people would sign up to, which
But you
may
have
not
to-
even
but you have
come
to
close.
balance-
A lot of
You have to
MSP and
balance
MSSP
business-
contracts are written like that. Yeah.
You have to balance business need with Lee's point with expertise and go, what are we gonna own more down to like the full stack versus what are we gonna rely on external third party and
Right.
trust third parties.
But I
And
don't.
that-
But I love you, Lee. But I don't think the primary decision is expertise. I think the primary decision is.
I said it
cheaper.
was missing. I think.
True.
Bye, Bill.
It is missing.
I think in your description of the deltas, I was saying you were leaving expertise out.
True.
That was a factor. There's all the other things are valid too. I'm just saying, it's. I mean, I don't have, and
But
I
again,
don't have
it's
the
the
time
cost of
like
do
to
you
download
invest
and
in-
compile Linux
do you invest
from
in-
source.
Building the
Right.
the expertise in house or developing the expertise in house, or do you pay for somebody else that you assume has that expertise?
Right. Do you want
Right.
to download the free Linux for all your corporate OSs, or do you want to let somebody like a Red Hat or an Amazon put a build together that you just install?
Right.
It's not
Gen 2.
perfect, and that's
Gen
of course
2
why
for
we're
the
having
win.
the conversation.
Linux from scratch, Josh. I'll do you
Yeah.
one better, right? Do you want to do Linux from scratch? Do you want to do Gentoo? Do you want to do Arch and start marching through Manjaro, right? Then it goes to Debian, then it goes to Ubuntu, then it, goes to even some of the, like Linux Mint, more fluffy. There's a range, and when we talk about open source adoption of software and technologies, there's a lot of factors that come into play. There's business requirements, there's expertise, there's security requirements, areas of responsibility and accountability. It doesn't matter whether it's cloud, whether it's open source, whatever it is. The more responsibility you assume, if you do that well, the better you can secure it and make it more reliable and resilient for your environment. Bye, Bill. Bill dropped. I don't know what happened to Bill.
I think
He dropped.
Bill had said previously, once his wife gets home, he's
No.
Bill
dropped.
got a personal multi-factor authentication request.
Gotcha.
I think that means his wife got home.
Oh, speaking of Linux, I just want to say I saw my article number 14, why installed Linux on an old laptop instead of a Raspberry Pi. This person came to the same conclusion I came to fairly recently, in that Raspberry Pi 4s and 5s aren't great at desktop computing. Like, they're just not great. Like, they're great for a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
Running desktops, not so much.
Does that mean running what used to be Office, but now is whatever Microsoft 365?
On open source, it's only Office runs great. I've never tried to run that at a Raspberry Pi. I don't think.
I guess my question
really
is, what do you mean by desktop? Running stuff like
running like a web browser, email client, Slack, Zoom, that kind of software on a Raspberry Pi. Not doing a whole bunch of other stuff. Raspberry Pis are friggin' amazing.
Yeah.
Great, extremely competent, hardware, software, firmware stacks. For like a desktop thing, if you get an old laptop or even an old Nook, like in my case, even like a really older PC or laptop,
Right.
is going to be way more performant than a Raspberry Pi 5 with 8 gigs of RAM. Even with 8 gigs of RAM is what I found in my personal testing, and a testament to this, the author of this article. And so what I did was, I'll send you guys before the show, right? I found some old Intel Nooks. I replaced the Raspberry Pis that helped me run the show here. Like, I got one with my show notes. I got one running Slack, and I recently replaced them with like even older Intel Nook PCs running Ubuntu, because Ubuntu it works and super easy to configure. And also, when people make software, they typically make an Ubuntu package for it. And I'm like, these aren't my everyday systems. These help me run specific things for the podcast. Ubuntu on these Nooks, fantastic. Raspberry Pi on the desktop, not quite there. Raspberry Pi for a lot of other applications is absolutely phenomenal. Well,
You got to know the limitations. I mean, I think I've said before, I created an ADSB receiver that I run on a Raspberry Pi, and it's wonderful. But as I look at the updates, it reminds me of the old, no offense to anybody, the old Fedora days when you get 200 updates a night. And it's not that bad, but and it doesn't handle my mesh network very well. It sometimes will flip between nodes, and sometimes it'll drop. So I had to write a job that checks the network and restarts it when it drops. I'm not saying I love the Raspberry Pi. I think they're really awesome, but there are things they're better at. I'm not sure I'd deploy it as a desktop. It's got some neat capability, but I think a NUC, strapped to the back of your monitor is a really cool option for a desktop. Home
Assistant's great. The Raspberry Pi, RetroPie gaming stuff is great.
Oh, that's a hell of a lot of fun.
On a Raspberry Pi 5 is probably even better. I think I did it on a 3. Kodi Home Entertainment System, all that stuff, great for Raspberry Pi.
So aren't those arcades that are in Costco all Raspberry Pis inside?
Look at
what's
that.
What's
that?
In Costco, they're selling these arcades, retro arcade machines, and it's a Pi inside, isn't it? I mean, I think that's freaking awesome.
Yes, it is.
Tons of hacking projects on the Pi 5. I mean, even Kali Linux on a Pi 5 is probably, I haven't tested it. I'm assuming it's better. I tried to put it in a 02W. The Pi 0 is still not performant enough for me for a Kali.
It's cool, but it's
still not performance wise the way they are.
No, there's some little stuff you could do on it that'd be really cool. I mean, you could
when
like
you're looking
run some
at
vulnerable
lab stuff
targets
or hacking stuff you want to take on, go find an older PC. Sometimes you're going to be better off than a Raspberry Pi.
Oh, yeah.
And the price wise, it might not even be that much different, to be honest.
It's going to be actually, Raspberry Pis right now are not cheap. They're $100.
No.
Frankly,
when they were
go find an old laptop, right? That has this, because you're not taking into consideration the screen, right? You go by, this is what this person was talking about. Like, I had an old laptop. It would cost me $0. Has a keyboard, mouse, screen, all the ports, the whole thing, power adapter, battery.
But again, you're doing a cost benefit analysis, because what if that old device needs some sort of maintenance or support or repair?
Well, then you got throw
As
it
a
out. And you gotta go
learning
get something new,
experience,
Jeff.
that's a good thing, Jeff.
Right.
No, I
So-
agree,
and-
but
Yep.
as an extension of our prior conversation, it's a cost
valid.
benefit analysis.
Valid,
Right,
valid.
right.
But I mean,
No, agreed.
like at B-Sides Delaware, we gave away a dozen laptops. They were older ones, but they'd been donated, and we gave them away.
Sure.
Right.
There was a Windows server that was wiped, but you could turn it back into a server. Admittedly, it only held like 8 or 16 gigs of RAM, and it looked like a small refrigerator. But if you wanted to, you could turn it back into a server.
Hey,
Like
Oh,
there's
I
plenty
wanna
of
go-
hardware out there.
I want to go old schools. We got older stuff. Does anyone know, without looking at the show notes, the first air quote Zoom call? Did you guys see this story? Is my story
No.
number 13?
it was like 1916 or something.
1916
What?
was the world's first
No
air quotes,
friggin' way.
what I'm calling a Zoom call. So
All right, define your terms, because there's a trick in here somewhere.
I said air
Yes,
quotes
there
Zoom.
is.
So it says this was an article from Hackaday, world's first virtual meeting. 5,100 engineers phoned in 1916. This epic event stretched telephone lines over 6,500 kilometers using 150,000 poles and 5,000 switches, linking major hubs like Atlanta, Boston, Chicago, and San Francisco. John J. Carty banged the gavel at 8:30 p.m., kicking off the meeting, in which engineers listened in through seat-mounted receivers. No buffering or "can you hear me" moments. Even President Woodrow Wilson joined, sending a congratulatory telegram. How cool is that? Where the President of the United States gets on the call and says, "This is awesome!" Like, in President of the United States thanking over 5,000 engineers. I just thought it was a cool moment in U.S. history.
And,
It is
and
awesome.
Fast forward to my early childhood watching Petticoat Junction, Green Acres. It was a party line.
Right. But
So-
1916 is really early. That's the first party
They
line.
had
maybe.
Well,
muted
what year did
seats.
Alexander Graham Bell do the whole thing with the telephone?
18.
We could find that out.
If only we had a source of truth like the internet.
We have a source of information. It's not necessarily truth.
I call it the source of truth. With
I'm gonna
tongue
look it
in
up.
cheek, Josh.
1876.
March 10th, 1876 is when
All right.
Alexander Graham Bell telephoned his assistant, Thomas Watson.
So it took 40 years for them to figure out how to come up with the party line. But it
do the
became
party
a party line thing.
At a grand
That-
scale.
Well-
I mean, 5,000 people is a grand scale. I mean,
That is
Yeah, I'm
we get
thinking-
together with like 3 or 4 people and we're like, "Can you hear me? Is your mic muted?" Like we've almost gone in the opposite direction.
we kind of haven't evolved, have we?
We also expect perfect reception. I mean, like right now we're filming in 1080p and we whine about the fact that what we see is not 1080p. Like, and
Well,
if it's not 4K, God, what's wrong with you?
Oh,
What
I
are
want
you-
to talk about. Well, let's touch on a hacking tool.
sure.
Project Discovery released a tool called URL Finder, which is a high-speed tool for passively gathering URLs. So by passively, it's not sending, and I haven't looked into how it's doing this.
It's passive, Paul.
It's passive, not sending. So like if you say URL Finder -D for domain, the example they give is Tesla.com, it will enumerate all URLs that it can find that are valid or not valid, but because the ones I found were not valid, some of them weren't, but it will find all of those, enumerate all of the URLs for that domain. And then you can put in filtering, like only show me ones with, well, my friend Bob ran some queries against some domains. You may run it against domains and find it interesting. Just for pure example, what my friend Bob said is, you can search device manufacturer websites and use the word download as a random example and perhaps, find some interesting things that may let you download stuff from device manufacturers that may have firmware. That's what my friend Bob says. Anyway,
So
so it's my story number 16, Project Discovery's tool URL Finder. I thought was really awesome.
I'm thinking this must be, instead of actively scanning this domain or whatever for it, it's going out and hitting the search engine to see what's been crawled, because
Something, right?
yeah,
It's funny, Lee. I just installed the tool and ran it, and didn't really dig into exactly where it was getting the data from. Just kind of extrapolating that, like you said, it was pulling it from some kind of database. And they don't say. I didn't look into where it was getting the data from. Super fast, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
The results come up like very, very fast. So go check it out. Let's see. A couple of other quick ones I wanted to hit on. I want to hit on some fun ones because there were some fun ones in here. Like the garbage truck driver that found a 32-core Threadripper that had an RTX 2080 Ti gaming PC in the trash. This is my favorite story this week. I don't know where I got it. I somehow dug the story up from somewhere, but so this person found this PC in the trash, right?
Right.
And I just want to put this in context. The one that they found had a 3970X AMD Threadripper 36-core processor in it. I'm going to put this in context for you. In 2020, in roughly 4 years ago, around October, November, I built a computer for myself because I needed a new computer, and I was like, I'm going to build a brand new shiny one. I'm going to look and see what's out there. And it's right before, in that time frame, hardware had friggin' price-wise gone through the roof, and you couldn't like hardly buy anything because of the pandemic. And so I built a 3960 24 core, which retailed for about $1,400 at the time.
I remember you building that. Yeah.
4 years ago, dude.
Yeah.
On my website, securitypodcaster.com, you can find my full build specs. It still rocks. I want to say 40 years later, I'm running local LLM models, virtual machines, 18 million browser tabs. Like I can still throw whatever compute at this PC. It has 256 gigs of RAM that I put in it with 24 cores, and it still rocks. Like I'm not like noticing any performance things that I'm like, oh, I need to go build a PC. 4 years. And I did it for like just over $4,000, which, I mean, it is a lot of money. Don't get me wrong. $4,000 is a lot of money. But when you think about how much computing power that I was able to build into that 4 years ago, and there's no signs of me like going, I need to go build a new one. Like a new one that would rival what I have now is probably at least $6,000. Over the years, I've kind of, every once in a while, I go kind of price it out. I'm like, I'm still looking at $6,000 if I want to do this.
4,000 is about how much it cost for me to build my cabin, by the way, Paul.
Yeah, there you go. Right, and I built a computer, but that lasts me a really long time. Not forever. Cabin is forever, so it's probably a better investment.
It needs a new roof soon. Yeah.
Well, there you go.
Maintenance.
But so just put that in perspective. Mm-hmm. This person found in the trash for free a 36-core processor. They have an RTX 2080. I actually have an RTX 1080i, 1080 Ti graphics card that I got refurbished for like $500, which is a steal because I got it before graphics cards went through the roof. So they've got a better graphics card, a better processor. I paid $4,000 to build but I have a lot more RAM. They only have 32 gigs of RAM, but they've got a better processor, a better graphics card. They replaced the power supply. So what are we talking for a power supply, Josh? $300? I mean, that graphics card and processor is not
not cheap.
It's not efficient to power. So you want to put 1,000-watt power supply. So you're looking at $300.
1,000 watt. Which, by the way, raises your electricity bill. It sounds stupid, but it really does.
Believe me, it is not efficient in any case. Well, like for $300, you got a $4,000 or $5,000 PC.
Right. Even if he had to like completely rebuild it in a new case, I can't tell from the pictures whether he was able to reuse the case. Still,
No, he reused
he's
the
still
case.
way the
I
hell
think the
ahead.
only thing he replaced, Lee, was the power supply.
I thought so too. I'm looking and I look at he has a picture where it's all torn apart,
Yeah,
drying out.
and he just dried it out. Yep.
Yeah, which is awesome. I'm just saying he knew what the hell he was doing, which is great. And I'm like,
That
part of
person's
me's
lucky.
like jealous,
That
and part of
person's
me's like,
lucky.
I don't know if I had time. If I'd had the time to do what he did and get it right, not fry it.
Even still,
Yeah, it is
letting
this
it
is
dry
really
out.
neat.
Like, you can do other things while it's drying out. I'm just saying.
Oh no, it's not
You know,
that. It's that would Lee have thought to dry it out? With and all that stuff that he did to make sure, or would I just
Bill
gotten
have
in a
thought to
hurry
dry it out?
and fired it up and burned it out? You follow me?
right?
I just
Don't.
I'm impressed
Have
with
the
this
presence
guy.
of mind to not just dry it out, but go. I don't trust the power supply that's in it. I'm going to put a new power supply in it.
Exactly.
The thing worked.
Exactly. Yeah,
I think it's a
this
workhorse.
is awesome. And
That person's
Larry
smart.
would be proud of this,
Yes,
as if we aren't.
I know, right? I thought,
And
so those are my two fun stories. Was the
right.
the 5,000 engineer call in 1916,
That's a fun story, dude.
and the
Seriously.
dude
Yeah,
that got
it
like
is.
probably a $5,000 PC for free.
Lee, how about one of your stories? It's not a fun story, but
Sure.
it's a fascinating one. Story number 3. The demand for the FCC cybersecurity pilot.
Oh, that was cool. That was another kind
Yeah.
of a feel-good story. So, a number of months ago, they had a cybersecurity thing. They had about $200 million in the budget, and they said, schools, libraries, put in your request. It's going to be ranked by size and impact, whatever. And they were hoping they'd get a few applicants. They got total, and you were going to get money over 3 years. They got 8.7 billion in requests from 2,700 applicants. And
That's awesome.
I mean, I'm glad they all applied, by the way. I'm sorry there's not enough money, but I think it's awesome that they put themselves out there to try and get some, because, what if nobody shows up, right? But my other thought is, damn, there's an unfilled need. I mean, how many of us cyber professionals have reached out to our local schools to see if we could help them with our expertise? Yeah. I realize that it's not all free, but hell, there's things we could do to help them out. And so anyway, and shrinking budgets are part of it. But whatever. Like I said, I thought it was a really neat story. And I wish we had the money to give them all they wanted.
I want to go to one of your other stories that's more doom and gloom, especially after talking
Okay.
to Josh Corman. And we all know and love Josh Corman. He's a dear friend of mine. But we're having very serious. I hate going to serious conversation. Like, I'd rather be talking
He's a
about
dear
PCs
friend
and
of
throwing
ours.
trash. Friend of ours. He's a friend of. I sound like we're the mafia. Like a friend. Okay, he's a friend of ours. Like,
You'll
right?
do me
Like,
a small favor.
He's doing small. He's the main guy. You know what I mean?
He's a Goomba.
So,
Pazan.
Lee, your story number 2
Mm-hmm.
speaks to some of the things Josh, Alan, Alfred, and myself talked about in the recent BTS, and things that Josh and I have been talking about in the context of protecting our critical infrastructure, particularly thwarting the China threat, as we know the timeline is ticking for China to want to basically take over Taiwan and bring it back into mainland China. What that means for the U.S. We basically can't allow that. I'm going to summarize, like Cliff Notes version is, we can't allow that to happen as the U.S. because so much of our chip manufacturing happens in Taiwan. China knows this. They're gaining access to our systems, we believe. It's all speculation, but strong evidence is they're gaining access to our systems, as evidenced by the Typhoon campaigns, to go, yeah, if you interfere with us taking over Taiwan, like, guess what? We're going to go disrupt U.S. critical infrastructure. Josh brought into the picture water systems in the U.S. And I hate doom and gloom, but here's the thing. I've been doing this podcast for 19 years. There's not much right now that keeps me up at night. Maybe over the years, there's been lots of things that maybe kept me up at night. I've been kind of hardened and battle tested so much in our industry
Mhm.
that not much keeps me up at night. This fucking keeps me up at night right now.
Yeah.
And Josh was like, look, what if China wants a distraction, wants a proof of we're going to mess your stuff up if you interfere with us taking over Taiwan, and goes, yeah, we'll just take over your water systems. And guess what? We'll, through digital means, increase the pressure to your water systems where pipes explode. And you may not have the resources at the U.S. to respond to all of that. You may not have the physical resources in terms of raw materials or people to fix that in any period of time. How does that impact hospitals
or
How does that impact
organization and
organizations'
response?
quality of life for a lot of people? Because water systems are, as we know, critical infrastructure that's very vulnerable. If attackers can disrupt the physical aspects, he was like, look, a lot of the pipes are like clay pipes in the ground that you can't just repair. Like you have to replace the whole thing. They go under buildings and in the whole thing. And so your story number two rather, Lee, is even more. Now it's going to keep me up even more at night because that story.
And what's worse is that
even more, how more vulnerable we are, right?
And then there was this issue. I mean, CISA's got the responsibility, but the notification path to EPA is broken. So if something does go wrong, the incident doesn't get reported. One of the things that got my hackles up is when I was reading the PDF. My link is to another article, but there's a link to the PDF from OIG in there, and in it they say that if you took the town of Charlotte and disrupted the water supply for their system, it would cost about $132 million a day in lost revenue. If you took the state of California water system offline, it's something like it's billions a day.
Or hypothetically,
61 billion a day.
Asheville, North Carolina, which I just heard on the news today, are just getting back to drinkable water after how long ago was the hurricane? 6 weeks, 7 weeks,
Several
8
weeks.
weeks?
I was going to say several weeks.
Lord.
More like months.
So the interesting thing is you talked about the China risk, but what's the motivation of the Russian APT hackers? It's disruption.
Any adversary.
It's disruptive behavior.
Yep.
That's freaking disruptive, right? So I'd say we have two potential attack groups that are, fully capable of making it hurt. I mean, when I was focusing on the EPA part, I'm like, well, you can't fix the EPA notification, but make sure your notification stuff is updated. I've been in conversations lately where something happened and the information hadn't been kept updated, so they weren't talking about the incident.
But I also think
this other part
this ties into the one last thing in the 5 minutes we have left to talk about, and that is CISA.
Oh,
Josh, you were probably the first person to put in my brain political climate, Paul. What happens when political tides change?
so
What
Jen
happens
Easterly.
So Jen has announced she's retiring.
But I think
resigning.
She's not retiring.
I just
She's
want to put it out
resigning.
there.
I'm sorry.
But I think that was totally planned. I think the media is making a bigger thing.
Oh no,
that,
it was.
that it is.
Look,
I think
political
anytime an
appointees-
administration turns over, heads of these particular organizations know that based on the way the election goes, that they're going to resign. I think Jen
That's normal.
knew she was going
That's
to resign
normal.
when Trump got in
Yeah, it's
office,
normal.
and that's normal. I think
But-
moving forward is the larger question
Yep.
of what happens to CISA. I think that is on the front of everyone's brain who works in cybersecurity today. Maybe not the front, but a portion of your thinking post-election results is
Well, there was
what
a
happens
bill,
to CISA?
Well, there's
Now,
a bill put in by an Alabama Congress critter,
Mhm.
House Resolution 221 by Gary Palmer from Alabama to actually shut down CMMC as well. So there's a lot of
Which is that's horrible. Just
well, I mean, it's not going to change.
Just hearing you
much.
say that one-liner, my reaction to that is that's horrible.
Yeah.
But now back to CISA, I don't believe there's a scenario where CISA goes away entirely, and some of that some of that I should say is wishful thinking. Some of that's also we can't afford as a country to not have CISA. I think what's going to happen is we don't exactly know, but I think what's going to happen is there's going to be portions of CISA that are funded and portions that are not funded in a turnover in the administration, which is natural given the change of tides in the political, based on the election. But I think which pieces survive, which pieces don't, is somewhat up for.
Well, there's one other aspect, Paul.
But we can't lose the Kev. Hold on. I think we all agree. We can't lose the Kev.
I agree.
The binding
However,
operational directions of the Kev are helping
75% of
secure
civil
this
servants.
nation, and we can't afford to lose that.
We can't afford to lose it, but we can't afford to lose 75% of our civil servants either.
Mm.
And they've stated that they're going to be just firing 75% of the civil servants. I don't think they can.
No.
They bloated up the IRS with some, 80,000 new hires recently. So
Okay.
I
but
agree, Lee. I think it all depends on how they're going to, where they're
Right.
going to make cuts and where they're going to put budget in is going to be.
where
remains
the
to be
cuts
seen,
going to
right?
matter.
Right.
I this is just between us. Don't let this get out publicly, but I have long thought that there's an aspect of government that is a glorified welfare system.
it is the
Providing
largest employer in the country.
providing jobs for people that wouldn't ordinarily have jobs.
I
I've
mean, there
heard
may
that
be aspects
before
of that, but
repeatedly.
there's a lot of people that do very good work in the government. And there's a lot of people that don't. It's
To
I don't
combat
know
the
how to-
China threat, we need CISA. To protect
need
our
CISA.
critical infrastructure, we need an organization like CISA. But we need to do the right things, and not everything that CISA has done necessarily has been really
So let me
impactful and
put
effective.
you
And I
on
think
the
this is
spot.
What political pundits are preying upon is CISA is ineffective.
Let me put you on the spot, Paul, and Josh, feel free to answer. But what is the role of the defined role of CISA versus, when I was working for the government, it was NSA, CIA, FBI, DISA. I predate even U.S. Cyber Command. But
Right.
I've been told that what I did was in terms of, developing red teaming and the pit and all that, that was sort of the birthing of what became the U.S. Cyber Command. But CISA came about after 9/11. It's an offshoot of DHS. I'm confessing I'm ignorant on this, but what is the role of CISA?
To protect our critical infrastructure.
Yeah,
Right.
not just from cyber, from a lot of things.
From a lot of things, right? Disaster recovery planning as well as security for our critical infrastructure, different from wartime or.
So the CI and CISA is critical infrastructure?
It is critical
That is correct.
infrastructure security agency.
Security
Yes.
agency.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
And it's an offshoot of DHS, if I'm not mistaken, right? Department
I
of Homeland
believe
Security.
so.
I think it might be.
I'm pretty sure it is.
It's going to be an interesting time to watch.
Yes, it is.
It
I'm
is.
hoping what this
remains to be
translates is
seen.
rolling back on some unfunded mandates to get down to the core of what needs to be done. No headers and blowers, just the root where we need to focus on the most
Who's going to make
critical
the
things.
decision? What functions of CISA are critical and which ones are not? Which ones are effective? Which ones are not? Is
So
Oh,
it'll be a ride.
That's a chipper note. Don't you have some last story to wrap up on about,
something
inflatables,
positive?
something, or just fun?
Damn it! I
I'm
don't
sorry,
have
they're
anything.
pulling the plug on us.
I don't have anything
Lots of
positive right
conferences
now.
happening.
We're
They're
getting the
coming
hook.
back from the dead. We had a great time at B-Sides Delaware. We had a wonderful time, about 160 some odd people. It was insanely cool, beautiful place.
Someday I'll come to it.
We'd really like Jeff. You have no idea how much fun you'd have. We would stick you in spawn camp and make you teach PCI to the kids.
I would do it.
Well, I want to thank
And I'd make it fun.
I want to thank everyone for listening and watching to this edition of Fall Security Weekly. Thank you to Lee, Mr. Jeffman, Josh Marpet. That will conclude.
Give it to me, Paul. Give it to me, Paul.
this
Over.
edition. Jeff, take us out.
Over and out.